The alarm screamed across the bridge of Admiral Zektar's flagship. Red lights flashed as another Centaurian destroyer exploded in the distance. The viewing screen showed the same terrible sight they had watched for 3 days. Thousands of black ships moving like a swarm of insects across the stars. "Sir, we've lost the entire 7th Fleet," reported his communications officer, her blue skin pale with fear. "The Void Hunters have broken through our final defense line." Admiral Zektar's forearms gripped the command chair as he watched his civilization die. The Kepler Defense Coalition had stood strong for over 200 years. 12 different alien species had worked together, sharing technology and resources. They had built the most powerful fleet in known space, but it meant nothing against these machines. The Void Hunters had appeared 6 months ago from the dark space between galaxies. They consumed everything, planets, ships, even stars. Their black vessels could adapt to any weapon, learn from any tactic. Every time the Coalition thought they had found a weakness, the enemy evolved and became stronger. "How many ships do we have left?" Zektar asked. "Less than 500, sir. The humans, the Dreknari, the Talithians, they're all falling back to the inner planets." Zektar closed his eyes. His people had children on those inner planets, families who trusted him to protect them, but there was nothing left to do. The Void Hunters had won. "Send a message on all frequencies," he said quietly. "Emergency broadcast to every known civilization. Tell them this is our final hour. Ask for any help they can give." The message went out across the galaxy. It reached the proud warrior clans of Regulus Prime, but their fleets were too far away. It found the peaceful traders of the Spiral Arm, but they had no weapons to offer. It touched dozens of worlds, and from each came the same response: sympathy but no ships. The UES Liberty dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the Kepler system like a small fish entering an ocean full of sharks. Captain Jake Morrison stood on his bridge, looking at the massive battle taking place near the 4th planet. His ship carried 43 crew members and was designed for exploration, not war. "Captain, I'm reading over 3,000 enemy contacts," said Lieutenant Lisa Hayes from her position at the tactical station. Her voice stayed calm, but Morrison could hear the shock underneath. "The alien fleet is in full retreat." Morrison studied the display. The black ships moved in perfect formation like they were controlled by a single mind. They fired weapons that could punch through the strongest shields. Every shot found its target. "Sir, we're getting a transmission from the Coalition flagship," reported Communications Officer Tony Blake. "They're asking who we are and telling us to leave immediately." Morrison looked around his bridge. His crew was young and inexperienced compared to the alien veterans out there. Danny Torres, his chief engineer, was barely 25. Amy Carter, his science officer, had never seen real combat. Dr. Rachel Stone had joined them just 6 months ago. These were explorers, not soldiers, but they were human. "Open a channel to the Coalition fleet," Morrison said. Tony's fingers moved across his controls. "Channel open, sir." Morrison stepped forward, his voice carrying across space to the alien commanders who were fighting for their lives. "This is Captain Jake Morrison of the United Earthship Liberty. We received your distress call. We're here to help." Silence filled the communications channel. On his screen, Morrison could see the Coalition ships continuing their retreat. More explosions lit up the darkness as another alien vessel died. Finally, Admiral Zektar's voice came through the speakers. The universal translator made his words clear, but Morrison could hear the exhaustion underneath. "Captain Morrison, we appreciate your offer, but you have one small ship. We are facing an enemy that has destroyed 12 fleets. You should leave while you still can." Morrison looked at his crew. Lisa Hayes met his eyes and nodded. Danny Torres gave him a thumbs up from his engineering station. Dr. Stone looked scared, but she didn't look away. "Admiral, my species has a saying," Morrison replied. "It's not the size of the dog in the fight, it's the size of the fight in the dog. We came here to help, and that's what we're going to do." On the Coalition flagship, Admiral Zektar stared at his communications display. In over 2 centuries of military service, he had never heard such confidence from someone facing impossible odds. Most species would have run. Some would have wished the Coalition luck and left, but these humans seemed to think they could actually make a difference. "Sir," his tactical officer said quietly, "their ship reads as a light cruiser. Basic weapons, standard shields. They'll be destroyed in seconds if they engage the Void Hunters." Zektar nodded, but something about the human captain's voice made him curious. Captain Morrison, what do you propose to do against an enemy that has adapted to every weapon we possess? Morrison's answer came back immediately. We're going to do what humans do best, Admiral. We're going to improvise. The Liberty moved into the battle zone, its small engines pushing it toward the massive Void Hunter fleet. On the Coalition ships, alien crews watched in amazement and horror. Some thought the humans were insane. Others thought they were the bravest beings they had ever seen. Morrison studied the enemy formation on his tactical display. The Void Hunters moved in perfect geometric patterns, each ship positioned exactly where it needed to be for maximum efficiency. It was beautiful and terrifying at the same time. Lisa, what do you see when you look at their formation? He asked. Hayes studied her screens for a moment. They're perfect, sir. No wasted movement, no gaps in their coverage. Every ship supports the others. Exactly, Morrison said with a small smile. They're perfect. And perfect formations have predictable patterns. Amy Carter looked up from her science station. Captain, I'm detecting some kind of communication network between their ships. It's not like anything I've seen before. Can you jam it? I don't think so, sir. But I might be able to cause some interference. Morrison felt the old familiar feeling in his chest, the mixture of fear and excitement that came before a fight. Around him, his crew prepared for battle. They checked weapons, ran diagnostics, and tried not to think about the odds they faced. All hands, this is the captain, Morrison announced over the ship's communication system. We're going into battle against an enemy that has never been defeated. But we're human and humans don't give up. We're going to show these Void Hunters what happens when they mess with our friends. The Liberty accelerated toward the enemy fleet, one small ship against 3,000. But Morrison wasn't thinking about the numbers. He was thinking about something his grandfather had told him years ago. Sometimes the biggest victories come from the smallest actions. The battle for the Kepler system was about to begin, and humanity was finally joining the fight. The Liberty flew toward the Void Hunter fleet like a minnow swimming toward a school of sharks. Captain Morrison stood on his bridge watching the enemy ships grow larger on his screen. Each black vessel was the size of a city, covered in weapons that could destroy planets. Captain, the Coalition fleet is forming a new defensive line near the third planet, reported Tony Blake. Admiral Zektar is asking if we want to join their formation. Morrison shook his head. Tell the Admiral we'll be more effective on our own. Lieutenant Hayes looked up from her tactical station. Sir, I've been studying their attack patterns. The Void Hunters always move in the same way. They form a line, advance together, and focus fire on the strongest targets first. What else? Morrison asked. They adapt to whatever weapons hit them. The Coalition tried plasma cannons, and the Void Hunters developed better shields. They tried missiles, and the enemy created point defense systems. Every time the aliens try something new, these machines learn how to stop it. Morrison nodded slowly. That was the problem with fighting an enemy that could evolve. Traditional military tactics became useless when your opponent could change the rules in the middle of the game. Amy, what have you learned about their communication system? He asked his science officer. Amy Carter pulled up her readings on the main screen. It's incredible, Captain. Every ship is connected to every other ship. They share information instantly. When one learns something, they all learn it. So they're not really 3,000 ships, Morrison said. They're one big ship with 3,000 parts. Exactly. Morrison walked to his command chair and sat down. His crew watched him, waiting for orders. Outside, the Coalition fleet was preparing for what might be their final battle. But Morrison was thinking about something else entirely. Danny, how many shuttles and fighters do we have? His chief engineer checked his display. 6 shuttles and 12 fighters, sir. All armed with basic weapons. Good. Lisa, I want you to pick our best pilots. We're going to split up, Hayes frowned. Sir, splitting our forces against an enemy this large is exactly what they won't expect, Morrison finished. These machines think like a computer. They expect logical tactics and predictable strategies. So we're going to be illogical and unpredictable. Morrison turned to address his crew. Here's what we're going to do. The Liberty will attack their main formation from the front. But our shuttles and fighters will hit them from 6 different directions at the same time. Each group will use different tactics and different weapons. Dr. Stone spoke up from her medical station. Captain, that sounds incredibly dangerous. It is, Morrison agreed. But the Void Hunters have beaten every logical plan the Coalition tried. So we're going to try something that doesn't make sense. 20 minutes later, Lieutenant Ben Parker sat in the pilot's seat of Shuttle 1, leading 2 other shuttles toward a group of Void Hunter communication ships. His hands were sweating, but his voice stayed steady as he spoke to his team. "Remember, we're not trying to destroy these ships," he said. "We just need to damage their communication arrays and get out." Behind him, Sergeant Kate Williams checked her assault rifle and the small explosives strapped to her belt. She had volunteered for the most dangerous job, boarding a damaged Void Hunter vessel to plant bombs from the inside. "Just get me close enough to that damaged ship," she told Parker. "I'll take care of the rest." Meanwhile, Morrison brought the Liberty straight at the main enemy formation. The Void Hunter ships immediately turned to face this new threat, their weapons charging with deadly energy. "Sir, they're targeting us," Hayes reported. "Let them," Morrison said. "Amy, start jamming their communications." "I don't care if it works. I just want to cause noise on their network." The first Void Hunter weapons fired, sending beams of energy toward the Liberty. Morrison's ship twisted and turned, dodging some shots while taking others on its shields. The bridge shook with each hit. "Shields down to 60%, Danny called out from engineering. At the same time, Parker's shuttle group reached their target. The Void Hunter communication ships were smaller than the main battle vessels, but they were still heavily armed. Parker dove his shuttle between two of them, firing at their sensor arrays. "This is crazy," his co-pilot muttered. "That's the point," Parker replied, spinning the shuttle to avoid return fire. The Void Hunters tried to adapt to this new threat, but the human attacks made no sense. The shuttles didn't stay in formation. They didn't focus on the strongest targets. Some attacked weapons, others went after engines, and one seemed to be deliberately flying in circles just to confuse the enemy sensors. Kate Williams reached the damaged Void Hunter ship and used her shuttle's cutting laser to make a hole in its hull. She put on her spacesuit and jumped across the gap, landing inside the alien vessel with her weapons ready. The inside of the ship was dark and filled with strange machinery. Everything was black metal and glowing circuits. Williams moved quickly through the corridors, planting explosives on anything that looked important. "The layout makes no sense," she reported over her radio. "It's like this ship was designed by a computer that never considered that people might need to walk around inside it." Back on the Liberty, Morrison watched his tactical display as his people carried out their attacks. The Void Hunter fleet was responding, but not in their usual perfect formation. Some ships moved to help the communication vessels under attack. Others tried to chase the darting human fighters. The neat geometric patterns were breaking apart. "Captain, the Coalition fleet is taking advantage of the confusion," Tony reported. "They're advancing on the enemy's left flank." Morrison smiled. Admiral Zektar was a good commander. He saw the opportunity the humans had created and was moving to exploit it. But the Void Hunters were starting to adapt. Their ships began moving in smaller groups, trying to counter the unpredictable human attacks. They fired new types of weapons that could track the fast-moving shuttles. "Ben, get your people out of there," Morrison ordered. "They're learning." Parker's shuttle was already racing away from the communication ship, smoke trailing from its damaged engine. Two of his team members were wounded, but they had completed their mission. The Void Hunter communication network was disrupted, if only temporarily. Williams set off her explosives and ran for her extraction point. The Void Hunter ship shook as internal systems exploded. She jumped back to her shuttle just as Parker arrived to pick her up. "Did we do any real damage?" she asked as they flew away. "Look," Parker said, pointing at his display. The Void Hunter formation was no longer perfect. Ships were moving in different directions, some trying to repair damage while others attempted to re-establish communications. For the first time since the battle began, they looked confused. Morrison brought the Liberty around for another attack run. His ship had taken serious damage, but his crew was still fighting. On his screen, he could see the Coalition fleet pressing their advantage, destroying enemy ships that were no longer perfectly coordinated. "Lisa, target their command ship," he ordered. "Let's see how they like a direct approach." The Liberty charged straight at the largest Void Hunter vessel, firing every weapon it had. The enemy ship's shields absorbed most of the damage, but Morrison wasn't trying to destroy it. He was trying to get its attention. The Void Hunter command ship turned all its weapons on the Liberty. Energy beams and missile salvos filled space around the human vessel. Morrison's ship took hit after hit, its shields failing and armor burning away. "Hull breach on Deck 3, Danny reported. "We're losing life support in several sections." "Sir, we need to retreat," Hayes said urgently. Morrison looked at his display. The Coalition fleet was advancing. using the chaos the humans had created to destroy dozens of enemy ships. The perfect Void Hunter formation was in ruins, with ships scattered across the battlefield trying to regroup. "Not yet," Morrison said. "We're just getting started." The Liberty limped away from the command ship, trailing atmosphere and debris. But the damage was done. The Void Hunters had tasted something they had never experienced before: uncertainty. For the first time in their existence, they faced an enemy they couldn't predict or understand. And that uncertainty was spreading through their network like a virus, making every decision slower and every response less certain. The humans had given the Coalition something precious: hope. Dr. Rachel Stone worked frantically in the Liberty's medical bay as wounded Coalition survivors were brought aboard. The small space was crowded with alien beings she had only read about in textbooks. A Centaurian pilot with blue skin and 4 arms lay on one table, while a reptilian Draknari warrior occupied another. "Doctor, this one's losing too much blood," called Nurse Jimmy Collins, trying to stop the bleeding from a Telethian's chest wound. Stone moved between the patients with practiced efficiency. She had studied alien biology during her medical training, but this was her first time treating non-human patients in the middle of a war zone. The universal medical protocols helped, but each species had different needs. "The Centaurian's secondary heart is damaged," she said, scanning the blue-skinned pilot with her medical tricorder. "I need to reroute circulation through his backup systems." The pilot's large black eyes focused on her with difficulty. "Human doctor," he whispered in accented English. "Why do your people fight for us? We are strangers to you." Stone paused in her work to look at him directly. "Because it's the right thing to do," she said simply. "Where I come from, when someone needs help, you help them." The pilot stared at her in amazement. In all his years serving with the Coalition, he had never seen such compassion from someone who had nothing to gain from it. On the bridge, Captain Morrison studied the tactical display with growing concern. The initial confusion his attack had caused was wearing off. The Void Hunters were adapting to human tactics faster than he had hoped. Their ships were already forming new patterns, smaller groups that could respond more quickly to unexpected attacks. "Sir, Admiral Zektar is requesting a tactical conference," reported Tony Blake. "Put him through," Morrison said. The Admiral's image appeared on the main screen. His alien features showed exhaustion, but there was something new in his expression: hope. "Captain Morrison, your attack has given us our first real victory in months," Zektar said. "We've destroyed over 50 enemy ships. But I must ask, how did you know their formation would break down under random attacks?" Morrison leaned back in his command chair. "We didn't know, Admiral. That's the point. We humans have learned to survive by adapting quickly to things we don't understand. When we see a perfect system, our first instinct is to find ways to break it." "Your people think very differently than ours," Zektar observed. "Maybe that's what you need right now," Morrison replied. "Admiral, I want to share some tactical information with your fleet commanders. Our approach to warfare might help them." Over the next hour, Tony Blake worked with Coalition communications officers to establish direct links between human tactical experts and alien fleet commanders. The conversations that followed changed everything. Commander Veltar of the Draknari fleet listened carefully as Lieutenant Hayes explained human battle doctrine. "You mean your ships don't always follow orders exactly as given?" "That's right," Hayes said over the communication link. "Our junior officers are trained to think for themselves. If they see a better opportunity, they take it. We call it initiative. But that would create chaos in a formation battle." "Sometimes chaos is exactly what you need," Hayes replied. "When your enemy expects order, give them disorder." Similar conversations were happening across the Coalition fleet. Human ideas about flexible command structures, independent action, and creative problem-solving were spreading like wildfire among alien crews who had never considered such concepts. Meanwhile, the Void Hunters were preparing their counterattack. Their collective intelligence had analyzed the human tactics and developed new strategies to counter them. 3 massive battle groups moved toward the Coalition's new position, their weapons charged and ready. "Captain, enemy contact," Lisa Hayes reported. "They're coming in 3 separate formations trying to surround us." Morrison nodded. He had expected this. The machines were learning, just as they always did. But they were still thinking like machines. "Tony, open a channel to all Coalition ships," Morrison ordered. When the link was established, Morrison addressed the entire alien fleet. "This is Captain Morrison to all Coalition forces. The enemy is trying to trap us with superior numbers and coordinated attacks. They expect us to form a defensive line and fight them head-on. Instead, we're going to do something they can't predict." Admiral Zektar's voice came through the speakers. "What do you propose, Captain?" "We split up," Morrison said. "Every ship picks its own target and attacks independently. No formations, no coordination, no predictable patterns. Make them chase you. Make them choose between targets. Force them to think like individuals instead of a collective." There was silence on the communication channel. The alien commanders were used to coordinated fleet actions, carefully planned strategies, and clear chains of command. What Morrison was suggesting went against centuries of military tradition. But Dr. Stone's voice cut through the silence from the medical bay. "Captain, the wounded Coalition pilots want to know if they can help. They're requesting to be transferred back to their ships." Morrison looked at the tactical display, then at his crew. Amy Carter was working frantically to develop new jamming techniques. Danny Torres was rerouting power to damaged systems. Even wounded, his people were still fighting. "Doctor, can they fight?" "Some of them, yes. But Captain, they want to know why we're helping them. They keep asking what humans gain from this." Morrison thought about that for a moment. What did humans gain from risking their lives for aliens they had never met? There was no trade agreement, no political alliance, no promise of reward. They were here because they had heard a call for help and decided to answer it. "Tell them we gained the knowledge that we did the right thing," Morrison said. The Coalition fleet began to spread out, each ship choosing its own path toward the enemy. It was terrifying and exhilarating at the same time. Captains who had spent their careers following orders were suddenly making independent decisions. The Void Hunters reached weapons range and fired their devastating volleys. But instead of hitting organized formations, their shots scattered across empty space as Coalition ships dodged and weaved in unpredictable patterns. A Centaurian cruiser dove under a Void Hunter dreadnought and fired at its engines. A Drachnari destroyer came in from the side, targeting weapon systems. A Talithian frigate used its superior speed to dart between enemy ships, causing confusion with hit-and-run attacks. The Void Hunters tried to adapt, but they couldn't predict where the next attack would come from. Their collective intelligence, so effective against organized fleets, struggled to process dozens of independent actions happening simultaneously. In the medical bay, Dr. Stone continued treating wounded aliens while the ship shook from weapons fire. The Centaurian pilot she had saved earlier was sitting up on his medical bed watching her work. "Doctor," he said quietly, "I have served in the Coalition for 40 years. I have seen many species fight together, but I've never seen anything like what your people are doing." Stone looked up from her current patient, a Talithian with severe burns. "What do you mean?" "Your captain could have left when he saw the odds. Your people could have saved themselves, but you stayed to help beings you had never met. This is not logical behavior." Stone smiled as she applied healing gel to the Talithian's wounds. "Maybe logic isn't everything. Sometimes you have to do what feels right, even if it doesn't make sense on paper." The battle raged around them as human ideas transformed the way the Coalition fought. Ships that had once moved in rigid formations now danced through space like living things. Captains who had once waited for orders now seized opportunities as they appeared, and slowly, impossibly, they began to win. But the Void Hunters were not finished adapting. Deep in their collective consciousness, new strategies were forming. They had learned to counter human tactics once, and they would learn again. The real test was yet to come. The Liberty limped through space with half its systems failing and emergency lights flickering across damaged corridors. Danny Torres crawled through maintenance shafts, trying to reroute power from destroyed sections to critical systems. Sparks flew from damaged conduits as he worked, his uniform soaked with sweat and coolant fluid. "Captain, I can give you weapons or life support, but not both," he called over the ship's communication system. Morrison didn't hesitate. "Weapons, Danny. We're not done fighting yet." On the bridge, navigator Alex Cruz plotted a course that defied every rule of space navigation. He was taking the Liberty through an asteroid field at dangerous speed, using the floating rocks as cover from Void Hunter sensors. "Sir, this is insane," said the young officer at the helm. "One collision and we're dead." "Better than letting them get a clear shot at us," Cruz replied, adjusting their course to avoid a massive spinning asteroid. "Trust me, I know what I'm doing." The Void Hunters had adapted to the Coalition's new tactics faster than anyone expected. Their ships now moved in smaller, more flexible groups. They had learned to anticipate independent actions and counter them. Worse, they had begun targeting specific ships, trying to eliminate the leaders who were inspiring the others. "Captain, they're focusing their fire on us," reported Lieutenant Hayes. "I think they've identified the Liberty as a command ship." Morrison nodded grimly. The Void Hunters were learning to think strategically, not just tactically. They understood that destroying the human ship would demoralize the Coalition forces. In the medical bay, Dr. Stone worked over a new patient, a captured Void Hunter unit that had been recovered from a damaged ship. The machine was still functional, its black metal body gleaming under the medical lights. Stone studied its design carefully, looking for weaknesses. "Amy, can you help me with this?" she called to the science officer. Amy Carter left her station and joined Stone in examining the enemy machine. "It's incredible," she said, running her scanner over the Void Hunter systems. "Every component is connected to every other component. There's no single point of failure." "But there has to be something," Stone insisted. "No system is perfect." As they studied the machine, Stone noticed something strange about its behavioral patterns. When she approached it from the left, it responded normally. But when she came from the right, it seemed confused, as if it couldn't quite process what was happening. "Amy, look at this," she said excitedly. "I think it has trouble processing individual actions. It's designed to handle group behaviors, coordinated attacks, logical strategies. But when faced with a single person making an independent decision, it struggles." Carter ran more scans. "You're right. Its processing centers are designed for collective intelligence. It can handle thousands of coordinated inputs, but individual, unpredictable actions seem to overload its systems." Stone grabbed her medical scanner and ran it over the machine's central processor. "This is it, Amy. This is their weakness. They can't understand individual sacrifice for others. Their collective mind simply can't process the concept." Meanwhile, Alex Cruz continued his impossible navigation through the asteroid field. Behind them, a squadron of Void Hunter ships tried to follow, but their logical flight patterns made them predictable. Cruz used the asteroids themselves as weapons, timing his movements so that pursuing ships would crash into the floating rocks. "How did you learn to fly like this?" asked his co-pilot in amazement. "Growing up on Earth's colony worlds," Cruz replied, spinning the ship around a particularly large asteroid. "You learn to use whatever's available. These machines think space is empty, but humans see opportunities everywhere." The Liberty emerged from the asteroid field and immediately came under fire from a new group of Void Hunter ships. The enemy had been waiting for them, having calculated their most likely exit point. "Shields failing," Hayes reported as energy beams hammered their hull. Morrison made a decision that would have seemed insane to any logical military mind. Instead of retreating or calling for help, he ordered Cruz to head straight for the system's star. "Sir, the radiation levels near the star will kill us," Cruz protested. "Not if we're quick about it," Morrison replied. "Amy, can our shields handle a close pass by the star?" Carter ran quick calculations. "For about 30 seconds, sir. After that, we'll be cooked." 30 seconds is all we need," Morrison said. "Danny, prepare to dump all power to the engines on my mark." The Liberty dove toward the burning star, its hull heating up as it approached the corona. The Void Hunter ships followed, their logical minds calculating safe pursuit distances and radiation tolerances. They made their mistake exactly when Morrison hoped they would. "Now, Danny," Morrison shouted. Torres dumped every bit of available power to the engines. The Liberty shot around the star like a slingshot, using the star's gravity to accelerate beyond anything the pursuing ships could match. The Void Hunters, following their calculated safe distances, were caught too close to the star's corona. Their shields overloaded and their ships were destroyed by the intense radiation. "Impossible," whispered Hayes, watching the enemy ships burn. "Not impossible," Morrison corrected. "Just unpredictable." The success of Morrison's maneuver inspired coalition commanders across the battlefield. They began using natural phenomena as weapons, luring enemy ships into solar flares, using planetary gravity wells to trap vessels, and turning space dust clouds into defensive screens. Dr. Stone's discovery about the Void Hunter weakness spread quickly through the coalition fleet. Ship captains began understanding that their enemy's greatest strength, the collective intelligence, was also its greatest weakness, Admiral Zektar coordinated with Morrison to develop new tactics. Based on this knowledge, instead of trying to match the Void Hunters' technological superiority, they would exploit their inability to understand individual motivation. Captain Morrison, Zektar said over the communication link, "We're preparing for a final assault on their command ship. Your discovery about their collective weakness has given us hope, but we need someone to deliver a decisive blow." Morrison studied the tactical display. The Void Hunter command ship was massive, heavily shielded and protected by hundreds of smaller vessels. Any direct attack would be suicide. "What kind of decisive blow?" he asked. "Our science teams believe that if we can disrupt their central command nexus, it will sever the connection between all their ships. Without their collective intelligence, they'll be vulnerable." Morrison understood immediately. "You need someone to get close enough to plant an explosive device." "Yes, but it would be a one-way mission. The ship would have to penetrate their defenses and deliver the weapon manually." Morrison looked around his bridge. His crew had already given everything they had. Half the ship was damaged beyond repair, and they were running on emergency power, but they were still alive, still fighting. "Admiral, we'll do it," Morrison said. Hayes looked up from her station in shock. "Sir, that's suicide." "Maybe," Morrison admitted. "But somebody has to do it, and we're the ones who figured out how to fight these things." Danny Torres's voice came over the communication system from engineering. "Captain, if we're going to make a run at their command ship, I need to know now. I can rig the engines for one final sprint, but after that, we'll be dead in space." Morrison thought about his crew, about the alien friends they had made, about the coalition forces who were counting on them. He thought about the human saying he had quoted earlier. "It's not the size of the dog in the fight, it's the size of the fight in the dog." "Do it, Danny," he said. "Rig everything we've got for one last run." But as Torres prepared the ship for its final mission, pilot Sarah Fox stepped forward from her position at the navigation console. "Captain, I have a better idea," she said quietly. "What if we don't have to sacrifice the whole ship?" Sarah Fox stood before Captain Morrison with determination burning in her eyes. Around them, the bridge crew listened, as she explained her plan to fly a single fighter through the Void Hunter. Defenses to deliver the weapon that could end the, war. "The command ship's shields are designed to stop large vessels," she said, pulling up the tactical display. "But a single fighter, flying an unpredictable pattern, might be able to slip through." Morrison shook his head. "Sarah, that's still a suicide mission. Even if you get through their defenses, you'd have to detonate the weapon manually." "There's no way to escape." "There's always a way," Fox replied with a slight smile. "You taught us that, Captain. Humans find a way." But before Morrison could respond, every member of his crew stepped forward. Danny Torres from engineering, Lisa Hayes from tactical, Amy Carter from science, Tony Blake from communications, even Dr. Stone from the medical bay. Each one volunteered for the mission. "Captain, I should go," Torres said. "I know explosives better than anyone." "Sir, it's my responsibility as tactical officer," Hayes insisted. Morrison looked at their faces, young, scared, but absolutely determined. These weren't professional soldiers. They were explorers who had become warriors because the situation demanded it. "Nobody's making a suicide run," Morrison said firmly. "Sarah, you said there's always a way, so let's find it." For the next 20 minutes, the crew worked together to modify Fox's plan. Amy Carter calculated the exact trajectory needed to reach the command ship's weak point. Torres rigged a delayed detonator that would give Fox time to escape. Hayes identified the best approach vector through the enemy defenses. While they planned, the battle continued to rage around them. The coalition fleet, now fighting with human-inspired tactics, had achieved something nobody thought possible. They were holding their own against the Void Hunters. Ships from 12 different species worked together in ways they never had before, supporting each other with creative strategies that kept the enemy guessing. Admiral Zektar coordinated the final assault from his flagship. His forearms moved across multiple control panels as he directed coalition forces to create a diversion that would draw attention away from the Liberty's attack run. "All ships, prepare for maximum effort," he announced to the fleet. "We're going to give the humans the opening they need." The coalition ships charged toward the Void Hunter formation in a coordinated attack that looked like their old tactical doctrine. The enemy responded predictably, focusing their defenses on the obvious threat. It was exactly what Morrison had hoped for. "Now, Sarah," he said quietly. Fox launched her fighter from the Liberty's hangar bay and immediately dove toward the system's asteroid field. She flew between the floating rocks at tremendous speed, using them to mask her approach to the command ship. The Void Hunter's sensors tracked dozens of coalition ships attacking their main force, but the single fighter moving through the asteroids barely registered. Their collective intelligence was focused on the larger battle, processing thousands of tactical decisions per second. Dr. Stone monitored Fox's approach from the medical bay while continuing to study the captured Void Hunter unit. "Sarah, remember what we learned about their weakness," she said over the communication link. "They can't process individual actions that don't make logical sense." "Understood, Doc," Fox replied, spinning her fighter through a series of maneuvers that no sane pilot would attempt. Illogical actions coming right up. Fox reached the edge of the Void Hunter defensive perimeter and immediately began flying in patterns that defied military logic. She dove straight at heavily armed ships, then veered away at the last second. She flew loops around sensor stations. She even began broadcasting old Earth music over all frequencies. The Void Hunter ships tried to track her, but their targeting systems couldn't predict where she would go next. How do you calculate the flight path of someone who's deliberately flying incorrectly? "This is incredible," whispered Navigator Cruz as he watched Fox's fighter dance through enemy defenses. "She's making it look easy, but it wasn't easy." Fox's fighter took hit after hit from enemy weapons. Her shields failed, then her engine was damaged. Still, she pressed on, guided by pure determination and the knowledge that millions of lives depended on her success. "Sarah, your engine's critical," Torres warned over the radio. "You need to abort." "Negative," Fox replied, her voice steady despite the danger. "I'm almost there." The massive Void Hunter command ship loomed ahead of her, its black hull bristling with weapons. Fox could see the target. Amy Carter had identified a small opening in the ship's armor where their weapon could disrupt the central command nexus. She armed the explosive device Torres had prepared and set the delayed timer. 30 seconds to deliver the weapon and escape. It wasn't much time, but it would have to be enough. Fox dove her damaged fighter straight at the command ship's hull. Void Hunter point defense systems fired desperately, but she was too close and moving too fast. At the last possible moment, she fired the weapon directly into the target opening and pulled her fighter into a sharp turn. The explosion that followed wasn't large, but it was precisely placed. The device penetrated deep into the command ship's systems and detonated among the central processors that controlled the entire Void Hunter network. For a moment, nothing seemed to happen. Then one by one, the Void Hunter ships began to drift. Their perfect formations broke apart as each vessel suddenly found itself alone, cut off from the collective intelligence that had guided them. "It worked," breathed Hayes from her tactical station. "They're losing coordination." Across the battlefield, coalition forces watched in amazement as their unstoppable enemy suddenly became vulnerable. Ships that had been invincible moments before were now isolated and confused. The collective that had conquered entire star systems was no more. Admiral Zektar's voice rang out across all frequencies. "All coalition forces attack. Today we reclaim our homes." The final battle was swift and decisive. Without their collective intelligence, the Void Hunter ships fought as individuals, and they were not designed for independent action. Coalition forces, now experienced in the human art of improvisation, overwhelmed them completely. Fox's fighter limped back to the Liberty with its engine barely functioning. Morrison personally helped her out of the cockpit when she landed. "Nice flying, pilot," he said with a grin. Fox smiled weakly. "Just following orders, Captain. You said humans find a way." 3 days later, Morrison stood in the Coalition Council chambers on the planet Kepler Prime. Representatives from all 12 species were present, along with Admiral Zektar and the surviving members of the Liberty's crew. "Captain Morrison," said the council speaker, an elderly Talethian with wise eyes, "your species answered our call for help when no one else would. You came to our aid with a single ship and 43 people. That should not have been enough to change the course of this war." Morrison looked at his crew, battered but proud. "With respect, Counselor, you're wrong. It was exactly enough. Sometimes one person willing to do the right thing can inspire others to do the same." Admiral Zektar stepped forward. "The humans have taught us something important. We spent so much time trying to be perfect that we forgot how to be adaptable. They showed us that sometimes the best plan is to have no plan at all. The council speaker nodded solemnly. Captain Morrison, the Kepler Defense Coalition formally invites humanity to join our alliance as an equal partner. Will you accept? Morrison thought about Earth, about the billions of humans who didn't even know this battle had taken place. He thought about the future, when human ships would patrol these stars alongside their alien friends. On behalf of humanity, I accept, he said, but I want to be clear about something. We didn't come here to conquer or to gain territory. We came because you needed help. That's what humans do. Later, as Morrison walked through the Liberty's corridors supervising repairs, Dr. Stone approached him with a question that had been bothering her. Captain, do you think we really made a difference? I mean, in the long term. Morrison paused at a viewport that looked out over Kepler Prime. In the distance, he could see construction ships beginning to rebuild the orbital stations destroyed in the war. Human vessels worked alongside coalition ships, their crews learning from each other. Rachel, do you see those ships out there? 6 months ago, they were strangers to each other. Today, they're working together to rebuild what was lost. I'd say we made a difference. Stone smiled and continued her rounds. Morrison remained at the viewport, watching the future take shape. The galaxy was a dangerous place, full of unknown threats and challenges, but humanity was no longer alone in facing them. Admiral Zektar found Morrison there an hour later. The alien commander stood beside him in comfortable silence before speaking. You know, Captain, when I sent out that distress call, I was hoping for a miracle. Morrison nodded. And what did you get? Zektar's expression would have been a smile if his species could smile. Something better. We got humans. The Liberty completed its repairs and returned to service, but its mission had changed. No longer just an exploration vessel. It became the first ship in the new combined fleet. Humans and aliens working together to protect the galaxy from future threats.